He turned water into wine, I turned whiskey into songs. Too many second chances, too many too far gones. Gave me grace along the way, took my heart and led me home. Don't you see, it's a God thing for me. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. We only grow with your help. Thanks for doing it. On the show, we're focusing on a nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with a very special guest, Hemp Meadows. Hemp Meadows, real name Scott Arvin, known professionally as Hemp Meadows, at 73 years old, stands at the intersection of experience, faith, reinvention, success, failure, wisdom, and purpose, the very crossroads where millions of men now find themselves. His voice carries uncommon authenticity because he has spent decades walking through the exact struggles, questions, victories, disappointments, and awakenings that define the second half of a man's life. Scott is an award-winning singer-songwriter, performer, speaker, storyteller, entrepreneur, and creative visionary whose life has unfolded across music, media, business, ministry, and a personal transformation. Both beneath the public accomplishments of Hemp lies a deeper story that qualifies Scott to write the new book from Heartland Publishing, Finishing Strong. The voice of a trusted friend, mentor, artist who understands eternity is real and time matters. Let's spend some time with Scott.
All right. Well, welcome into the studio. I know you had a long way to go. Traffic probably didn't slow you down since you're in the neighborhood, as we say. What age did you leave for California? It was San Francisco, right?
Yeah, I was born in 1953, so I'm a baby boomer. And by the time I was 11 years old, I had the opportunity to see the Beatles on TV. I was one of 73 million people that watched the Beatles live on Ed Sullivan. And anybody that saw that show, their lives have been transformed. If you can ask any musician, that was the moment when they knew what they wanted to do. And my parents had always told me, you can be anything you want to be. And as soon as I saw the Beatles, I said, that's what I want to be. And they said, you can't be that.
What was it about that telecast? Was it the fact that it was the first time live music was on television?
Oh, no. Elvis had been on the show and lots of other, the Ed Sullivan Show was must-see viewing. There was only 3 channels. And everything it was a vaudeville. You could hear an opera singer, you could see the Beatles, you could see the Stones. Everybody was on that show. And we all loved it. You'd gather around the TV at 7:30 on Sunday night. But that launched so many different careers and passion for music because it was so unique, so refreshing, so different from anything else that had ever existed. And they were just wonderful. They were adorable. They played great. They had such enthusiasm and energy. And it sparked a revolution. It opened a door for all the bands to come in from there.
So you were sitting on the rug in Indiana.
I was in Kansas. Yeah, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. Yeah, which was actually a very cool place to live at the time. It was, in fact, L. Ron Hubbard had lived there. Allen Ginsberg had lived there. Don Johnson is from there. Kirstie Alley is from there. Joe Walsh is from there. I'm from there.
All right. Well, that was
far from there. Everyone went far from there, but.
Did you have some family issues or just where the music was?
I had some significant family issues. So my mom was a federal judge and my dad was a state senator, and both of them were attorneys. And I wanted to be a long-haired, dope-smoking hippie folk singer, which was not part of their game plan. Yeah. And it really wasn't part of mine either. It's just where the culture pulled me and where my talent kind of took me as well, too.
So was the Beatles growing up, family more like Leave It to Beaver, or like Axl Rose in Lafayette, Indiana, in trouble with the law? He had 20 arrests. Was that you who finally said, all right, I'm going to California, a place I ought to be?
Well, I started to have significant authority issues later in high school.
Okay.
Basically, because the culture was changing so radically during that time frame, and politics was part of that, as well as fashion and music. So it was a big jumble of everything was kind of dissembling and coming back together in new forms that no one had anticipated. And Carnaby Street was happening in England, and all these bands were coming in that didn't look like anything that had ever happened before. And it started just to kind of change the fabric of society, along with different things that happened politically. And the old guard was breaking down, and the revolutionaries came in, and I became enraptured kind of with the revolutionary thing, the SDS, the Weathermen, anything that was anti-authority. I ran for student body president on burn it down, then we'll talk. It was the total anarchy ticket, and I only lost by 50 votes. So I was committed.
That's a good album for title.
Yeah, it's a Jefferson Airplane or something.
Yeah, I mentioned Axl because he also found an early outlet in music.
Yeah.
Church choir in high school, like you, said he blacked out most of it. Were you anything like that?
No, I wasn't really like that, although my church experience did inform my vocal abilities, because I think back in the day, we had school choir. I don't know if that even exists anymore. So you didn't really have to try out. Everybody was involved. And the school I grew up in, we sang before, we had little songs that we would sing beforehand. You'd always did the Pledge of Allegiance, and you had a prayer. It was a very different environment as far as school was concerned. But I grew up in church, in Southern Baptist Church, and so we had a combination of hymns that we sang, and the choral thing, and choirs, and I was in youth choir. I was in youth orchestra, citywide. I was a drummer. We'll talk more about that later, I'm sure.
Yep.
But as a drummer, I had the opportunity to study with a protege of Joe Morello, who was Dave Brubeck's drummer. And so I had fantastic instruction, and I was talented. My dad was a former drummer. And my dad could have been a Broadway star, but he opted to have a family, so he didn't pursue that. But he had all the talent. My mom wrote 3 books, so I come from a very artistic family. And what was exciting about it was you had so many opportunities to grow and develop musically. And then rock and roll came along, and there was no way to learn rock and roll. You just had to rock, and you learned it along the way. No one could teach you that kind of thing. So the culture was changing, and I really felt a burning desire inside to go to San Francisco. It was like a godly leading, where that was like where the next chapter of my life was going to happen.
A real calling.
It was.
So what was the scene like? Summer of Love 2.0 or
Exactly.
Mean Streets and getting down to business side of rock and roll? What was San Francisco like?
San Francisco was glorious. I mean, for a kid from Kansas to go out to San Francisco was amazing, because it's a very sophisticated, very cosmopolitan, very international city. And I had done a little bit of traveling, that kind of thing, but with the family. It was the first time I'd ever had the opportunity to get out there. And the trip out there was amazing because I didn't have any money. I was just a hippie folk singer. And I actually had a VW bus, which was classic. But I sold the bus, and with the money, I hitchhiked out to California. The reason I sold the bus was because I didn't have enough money for gas. I can probably make it to the edge of Kansas, and then what do I do with the van? So I just went ahead and sold it, and then hitchhiked out to California with a friend that I was staying with, and he had a friend that came through, and he was hitchhiking to California, so I joined him. Yeah. I got a backpack and a foam pad underneath so we could lay out, and we would hang out underneath the stars, maybe sleep under a bridge.
This is the real life on the road with Jack
It was
Kerouac.
on the road. It was amazing, and I had my guitar with me, and that opened a number of doors. Wow. The guitar.
I think of the Jack Kerouac story with his thumb tied up in a bandage because he heard it and he's hitchhiking out at the end of that on the road.
And you just pick up a ride wherever you could, and once in a while another VW bus would pull up and the doors would open and smoke would roll out, and you'd go, oh yeah, and they go, where are you going? I go, we don't know where we're going. We'll go with you, and we just head out.
So what did you learn in the San Francisco days that you ended up taking with you to Los Angeles by the next phase?
Well, I wound up playing every coffee house in town, and it was a great experience. And the city was alive. The Summer of Love had happened, and the hippies had kind of gotten ensconced. The first co-ops were coming up, the first health food stores. There was, the culture was changing, and the hippie
the beats,
movement was.
Because you mentioned Jack Kerouac, the beats were there.
Yeah, that San Francisco was the mecca for all things philosophical or anti-establishment, and
Tibetan Buddhism.
So it was in the air. There was just, along with the smell of ganja, was very thick in the air as well too. It was an exciting place to be. But ultimately, musically, I got a manager there quite by accident. But we met, and he fell in love with my music and wanted to champion me, and I needed that. And so we made a determination we were going to go to Los Angeles in search of a record deal.
Is that before or after Altamont in Oakland?
That would have been. I never really knew about Altamont back at the time. I never even thought about the relationship between that time frame, but it was in that time frame. Yeah.
Some say
but LA was an entirely different experience than San Francisco.
Exactly what I was leading to. Okay, so tell us.
As you know, because you grew up in Napa.
But what did you find when you got there? Because my Northern California to Southern California story is very different. About a decade later, too.
Yeah.
But what did you find in LA that you wanted that you didn't get in San Francisco?
Palm trees and sunshine and the beach and just a whole nother scene completely. The Sunset Strip.
The music style is very different.
It was happening. It was like on Friday nights, you couldn't even drive down the Sunset Strip. It was filled with kids.
Wow.
Entirely different vibe, entirely different. And everybody had come from all over the world once again. But instead of going to San Francisco, those kids came to be stars. They came to be movie stars or rock stars. That's why they left home. And I didn't really have that ambition per se. I was more of a James Taylor, Crosby, Stills, and Nash type of guy as opposed to someone who really wanted to be a rock star. But I got encouraged by people that said, you ought to be on TV. Or people would say, I saw somebody on TV and you're better than that guy. Why don't you make it happen? And so I did.
It's a very stylistically different Northern California to Southern California music vibe as well. It could
the
be two
lifestyles
states.
are completely different as well,
you
too.
got your Jefferson Airplane versus your Eagles, who I know you befriended.
Yeah.
So did you find your musical style in Southern California that maybe you didn't know you had in San Francisco?
Yeah, because I got an electric guitar and I started to rock.
There you go.
Yeah, I worked at a music store. I actually worked where my first band came together. I worked at, I don't know if you remember where Tower Records was.
Sure.
Everybody knows about Tower Records back in the day. And
Slash and I used to steal cassettes from there.
There you go, right? And every rock star would come in to release their record there. Yeah. So we met everybody from Rod Stewart to Elton John to whoever. They would all stop in. But across the street from that was a real high-end stereo store called University Stereo where I worked. And Pink Floyd actually came in there with The Wall because they wanted to find out what it sounded like on various systems, in the mix down. What does it sound like on a car system? What does it sound like on a high-end system? And what does it sound like on a mid-range, $150, $200 system? So that was cool. So you'd always have that kind of thing happening. And you'd run into people wherever you went. But it was a different thing, and punk rock was just kind of starting to happen in England. And I wasn't really entranced with punk as much as I was pop punk, which was a little different than what traditional rock and roll was. Right. It was more like
what became Green Day.
It was more the sound of the 80s, like the Knack and bands like that.
Right.
There was a whole LA scene that happened that I happened to be part of. That was really cool.
And that leads me to my second question, but I want to get there in a second. So we all know the goddess of pop. We know her as Cher. Her real name is Cheryl Sarkeesian. Kid Rock is Bob Ritchie. Eminem is Marshall Mathers III. Right. How'd you come up with Hemp for your stage name?
I was high at the time.
In L.A.?
Yeah, literally. No, not in L.A.
No.
I was still operating under my same name, my real name.
Okay.
And in fact, that was the name of my band. I had different incarnations of a band, as everybody does. You have this band, that band, this one, based on the revolving cast of characters that are involved, And Neil Young told me one time, he said, I'm so lucky that I wound up, being who I am in music because I'm no different than anybody else. I just didn't quit. Somebody got a job, somebody got married, somebody got divorced, somebody got in the army. Bands were always breaking up, and he just stayed with it. He said, I'm not any more talented than anybody else. although he is.
Right.
He's just being, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear from a guy who came out of a band and then went on a solo career for the next 50 years with his name, Neil Young, unless it's Neil Youngenstein
and
or something.
I was never really a band guy. I was an artist and a singer-songwriter, but I happened to meet a guy from New York at this store that I was working at, and we just hooked up, and it was funny because he was short and Italian, and I'm tall and Anglo, but we just hit it off beautifully. And we had a synergy as far as our writing and playing was concerned. So, you know, it was back in the day when you have 3 or 4 guys in an apartment, you know, on La Cienega or wherever, and nobody had any money. You had just enough money for maybe a little bit of grass and, you know, maybe a toot here and there. But we'd sit down and just start writing songs, and one thing led to another, and we got really good. And then we wound up getting a producer and making a demo record, and it kind of took off from there.
Awesome. Now, tell us about your experience as the only guy in town at the time with the most in-demand product that was exploding onto the scene, the electro drum machine. How'd you get that gig?
Well, the drum machine was a revolutionary new product. It was the first computerized musical instrument. It was the first instrument that took analog drum sounds and turned it into digital sounds, which was brand new at the time. It had a Z80 microprocessor in it, and what Roger Lynn, who was the inventor of the drum machine, did was he went into the studio and he was able to capture drum sounds, you know, all the different sounds and cymbals, and there was only a limited range of time that you could have the sustain on a cymbal, for instance. It wouldn't even ring out all the way, but he was able to take those sounds and computerize it so it was programmable. And it was the first instrument of its type. This was right when synthesizers were just beginning to come out, and MIDI was a brand new thing. And I happened to be working at another store at this time, West LA Music, which was the biggest music store on the West Coast. My buddy that I had a band with became a manager over there, and I came over with him. And I wound up putting tour packages together for Queen and David Bowie and REO Speedwagon, and, you know, where they have a manifest that comes in and they have to have everything from amps to chords to whatever. And we'd fill that out, and along the way you get to meet the management company and sometimes the artists. Air Supply was a big client. They were just coming out at the time, you know. So got to work with all these bands, and I had maybe a little bit of notoriety, but somebody gave my name to Roger, and Roger called me up, and he said, hey, I need a national sales manager for this new product I've got. Can you come over? And he had a place over in Burbank. He had just come out of his garage and from his living room, and now he was in his first place in an industrial park. And I came over, and as soon as he played the instrument for me, he just kind of tapped on these little keys that were on it, and I heard what it was. The hair on the back of my neck went up.
Yeah.
I realized this was going to revolutionize music, because as a songwriter, the biggest problem you always had was you got to have a drummer.
The rhythm section.
And now we had one, and it was in a box, and you could take it with you, and you could have it there. And
it wasn't like Keith Moon
drums.
that was crazy, who was going to blow up things. Like,
no,
you could actually rely on it.
It was all up to you.
Yeah.
You had complete control over the rhythm track now. And you didn't need a drummer per se.
Right.
And that's one of the things that Mick Fleetwood got freaked out about when I went into the studio with Fleetwood Mac. Was he took one look at that and went, get that thing away from
put
me.
me out of business.
That's
Yeah.
what he said,
Yeah.
exactly. But Lindsey Buckingham said, I want to use that on my solo record, and that's how I wound up working with him.
Wow, I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I could see a lot of names like Phil Collins or, Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses saying, like, you don't need me. Like, Tommy Lee, like, if I wear out and pass out, you just fill in with a computer. But you were the guy.
Well, what happened was that people could use it. And I told Roger, I said, the first thing we have to do is get a hit record with this thing to get it out. It wasn't out at all, and so we were real fortunate. The first band that used it, that made a hit with it, was Human League in England with Don't You Want Me Baby, which became a big #1 hit. And it was just a guy and a girl singer and a producer in the studio. That was it. And the producer played the keyboard and the drum machine and hooked it up, and then the guy and the girl sang the song. They made a video about it. MTV was just coming out, and it just blew up.
Perfect.
And from there, everybody wanted to know, what is the sound on that machine? And they started, Roger knew everybody in town. He grew up with the guys from Toto, and they were all friends together. And he played in Leon Russell's band. He wrote a couple of songs for Eric Clapton. So he knew a lot of different people, and those doors were open. He knew all the people with studios, and so all the time calls would be coming in like, can you come down to Sunset Sound? Can you come down to Larrabee Studios? Can you come to Westlake? We've got some clients here that want to see the drum machine. And sometimes they were, the studio owner himself because he wanted to buy a machine and have it available. And sometimes it was an artist that wanted to use it. And I met a lot of guys that way.
You did. And do you have a favorite? I think Prince, Don Henley, Devo were all tracks you played on.
Yeah, there. It was what was fun was that you never knew who you were going to go see on any given day, and or any given night, because a lot of times the call would come in and they had my personal number. The way I wound up playing on 2 records with Rod Stewart was I knew Dwayne Hitchings, who was a writer and the keyboards player for Rod, and he finished a record with him at Sunset, and they went, we've got a couple of options here as far as we want to put another song or two on the record, and I got a call at midnight from Dwayne saying, hey, I've got a chance to get a song placed with Rod. He had wrote Do You Think I'm Sexy? And so he was a keyboards player, but he was also a songwriter, and he thought, I can get another record with Rod if I can demo it real quick. Can you come down with the drum machine? And I said, who's the artist? And he said, Rod Stewart. And I said, I'll be there. Yeah. So I got up, and we went down, and about 3 a.m., we're doing this track. And then the next day, I get a call back from Dwayne. He says, Rod loves it. He wants to do it. And that was a song called Young Turks, which is Young Hearts Breathe Free Tonight.
Love that song.
Do-do-do-do.
Yeah, that was the theme of my prom, by the way.
Okay.
So who knew that I'd be sitting here across from played the drum tracks on that, or at least provided the technology. The 80s that we're talking about now were obviously an explosion because of MTV. And I remember very clearly, I was a big fan, the story, Duran Duran. Andy Taylor, great guitar player, Simon Le Bon, great singer, but they didn't like to carry their equipment around. They were kind of model actor type of folks.
Right, they were.
And so a drum machine would obviously be huge for them because you could carry it in your pocket. I mean, it wasn't as small as a cell phone was today, but you could do that and tour the world and make your bazillions of hits and singles without the drama of a band of 4 people. So fast forward to, I think it was 2020, maybe 15, I went to see Rick Springfield. Yeah. And he was by himself on a stool with his electric guitar and an iMac, where all of the things, including trumpet and backup.
All of his tracks were on there. Yeah.
And he said, I could have brought a guy to do this live in my favorite song, whatever, but this is cheaper. And I get to keep the ticket money. Yeah. So you were basically at the revolution
and
of
I do the same thing. Like with my band, Hemp and Denim, I can play acoustically with just Denim and me with acoustic guitar. We can do that and then add tracks because when we produced all of our tracks, we did what's called TV tracks, which is full instrumentation of the band except for the vocals. Even background vocals are there, but the lead vocals are not, and we lay those lead vocals in live.
Sure.
And then we have complete control of the sound, and it's very easy to do, and I've got it. I don't even have to put it on a thumb drive anymore. I've just got it. And it sounds fantastic. But then there's nothing like playing with a band. But once you get into a band situation, that would be for bigger gigs, obviously. Now the expense goes way, way up.
Right.
And
especially a touring band.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I found was that we played all different kinds of incarnations, and people said, hey, and I didn't really want to play except unless we had a band. But people came to us and said, hey, we're coming to see you and Denim.
Right.
It's Hemp and Denim. Because we always had different guys in the band anyway, every time. Because, in Nashville, I was only using first call guys. But they're all busy.
Right.
And so maybe they could do this gig, but they couldn't do that one. And so we were always having to cycle in different people, and then they'd have to learn a whole new set of songs, not cover songs, but originals, which they've got a woodshed. So there's additional expense there. Then there's a little bit of rehearsal. Then you go out and play, and you've got to pay them before you pay yourself. And sometimes there wasn't any money left,
Yeah,
so.
It's like back to the Axl story. He had those dark years where he was Guns N' Roses, but he didn't have Slash, he didn't have Duff, he didn't have Matt Sorum, he was just him.
He had the name.
Because he thought people wanted to hear him sing, but in reality, they wanted the band, and so they had to come back to that full circle. So you were this novelty, this wonderful new experience for all these amazing 80s and 90s, and today, pre-garage band tunes that, we are seeing a cycle back. So did it get to be commoditized? Did it get to be as simple as your iPhone with GarageBand, so it no longer was a monopoly, so to speak, and that's what led you to your Nashville days? Or how did you feel at your end of your LA time before your Nashville time?
Well, my LA time wound up in a haze of drugs and alcohol. And I'm one of those kids that was a Midwestern kid far from home, like Bob Seger sang, who's another artist I worked with. But I ultimately succumbed to the whole party scene.
Mm-hmm.
I lived with my girlfriend, my wife now, 2 blocks from the Whiskey, right up the hill, and we could just roll down. And we played there several times, but the Sunset Strip was a big deal, and
Viper
everybody was
Room,
doing cocaine back in
Roxy,
those days.
all of
Yeah, the Viper Club and everything. And so we were playing out, and we were popular, and there was always drugs around, and there was always lots of parties to go to. And, I loved the lifestyle. And it's like any person that's been into drugs will tell you it's great until it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And when it isn't, it's really bad.
If you survive.
And I'm very, very fortunate in that I did survive.
Right.
And, we broke up, my wife and I. We weren't married at the time, but we broke up, and I wound up basically on the street. Just as you read about guys like Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night, where he's like trying to get a fix and he's selling his gold records, pawning them. It's a sad state of affairs.
So you really had that.
I had
top of the mountain all the way to the bottom.
Partying with the elite, working with the elite. I've worked with, consulted with, performed with, or partied with everybody that you can imagine through the 80s. Was friends with, and then when you're that's why I have such admiration for guys like Don Henley. We became friends and worked together, and, he had management and he had a band, and as bad as it might have been, he had an infrastructure of support that was able to take him through that I didn't have. And and maybe he had greater moral compass than I did. There's all kinds of variables there. But I wound up, on the street, and I had to make a one-way phone call collect back to my parents after 6 weeks on the street. I said, I can't take it anymore. I got to get out of here.
So
that was basically the end of my music career.
That was it.
Yeah.
So and your time in LA, because didn't it bring you to Nashville?
No, it took me back to Wichita, Kansas.
Oh,
That's
Kansas
what it did.
first.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wound up moving back in with my folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not
Which was, and watching all my friends on MTV. It was not a glorious moment. I was filled with a lot of anger and rage and inner turmoil, which is all signs of addiction. Those are all common things. But I didn't know how to do anything but play music. And there's no music scene in Wichita to plug into. And I'd already been at the highest end, so I was really lost. And, I wound up, just getting a job at the mall from which I got fired from. I was not clean and sober. I didn't have any focus in life or any real enthusiasm for doing anything because I was just on the outs. But my dad wound up, he was a big shot, and he knew the senior vice president of Boeing and said, hey, can you wrangle a job for my son? And I wound up working for Boeing, of all companies in the world.
In Wichita, not Seattle.
In Wichita, which is the military version of Boeing.
They got you anyway.
So it was a very, very different time. It's like where guys talk about being in the Army and that they thank the Army for helping them to get on the straight and narrow. That's what Boeing did for
Thanks,
me.
Boeing.
Yeah.
So, so there was an interlude there, and then how'd you get to Nashville?
Well, I wound up, working for Boeing for several years, and my wife Lucy came in, and we got married and started our life, which was 40 years ago. Still married, more in love than ever.
Mazel tov.
A lot of stories in there too, because we've gone through it like anybody that's been married for 40 years. But I wound up getting an opportunity in the nightclub business, of all things, which was not a good place for me to find myself. But I had a friend who had a nightclub that was failing, and I came in with a business idea for him. And he said, this is kind of a cool idea. If you write a business plan and I like it, I'll fund it. And he was a very, very wealthy guy. And I did, and he did, and we put in one of the actual premier jazz clubs, which I called Roxy's Downtown in honor of Roxy's in Hollywood. But we opened with Wynton Marsalis and Branford Marsalis and Harry Connick and the Yellow Jackets and Larry Carlton, and I wound up booking all those bands, and it was a great time. Wave radio was on, and it was soft jazz, smooth jazz, that kind of thing, and there was a real audience for it, and it was great. And I wound up having an opportunity with another company in sales and marketing, and I went in that direction, and that was a complete career change. It actually gave me a career in speaking, public speaking, and sales and marketing and training and recruiting and managing sales teams. And I found I had a knack for that, and it was creative and fun. And I wound up being on stage a lot because I was doing presentations, so I kind of got that Jones handled. And I started to make some real money. And it was fantastic. And so when we started to make some real money, we moved back to California because we've always loved California. It's a tragedy what California is like now compared to what it was like. But we moved to Santa Barbara. We got a condo on the beach. We had a great time living there. And yet, even at that time, the taxes were so high and the scene was kind of out of control. And we were doing a lot of business in Scottsdale, Arizona, and flying back and forth. And we ultimately decided, hey, let's move to Scottsdale and come back to California because it's so much cheaper. There's no income tax. And even though it's the desert, it's not the ocean, it'll be another scene. And we lived in Scottsdale for a couple of years. And I found a great church there, Scottsdale Bible Church. And they had a seminar for guys that were successful but didn't really have a focus in their lives. And I went to this, and there was mind mapping, vision casting, trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. And in the midst of that, God spoke to me, and he said, I want you to move to Nashville.
Nashville. He said the word
Nashville, very clearly. Yeah. I had a brother here. Which wasn't
a thing then.
It was not a place that I had ever dreamed that I'd been in and out of Nashville for like business conventions. It had no allure for me. I wasn't in music, particularly not into country music.
It was a road stop.
It was just, we'd go in, come out, and that was another day. But I had a brother here who had cancer, had a lymphoma, and almost died, but I was flying back and forth to be with him. And my parents were still in Wichita. They were starting to get to a point where they were going to retire, and they didn't want to retire in Wichita. Like my dad said, all my friends are dead. What am I going to do? But my brother and I had never lived in the same town together as adults. I was always on the West Coast, and he was always in Nashville because he was in the music business, very successful as well, too. Entirely different world. He was in Christian music and country music, and I really didn't have any affinity for either one of those things. So we really were in silos. But God said, if you move to Nashville, you guys will be together as a family. I'm going to get your parents to move down there as well, too. And I went, wow, what a great plan. So I approached Denham with it, and I thought, man, she's not going to go for this. And she said, no, I think it'd be fantastic. Let's do it. So we flew back and forth several times to try to find a place here. In Nashville, in the year 2000 versus 2026, there's no relationship between those two cities.
Yeah, they've changed a lot.
There was one Starbucks in town, one Starbucks. And we flew back to Scottsdale one time, and she was crying. And I said, what are you crying about? And she goes, I just don't know if I can live in a town with only one Starbucks. And everything was colonial. There was no architecture here. It was still a country town. Yeah. And
Station Inn was...
and Music Row was really Music Row. Yeah. Which was happening. But I didn't, care for country music that much. And so I had no rapport with the city, but I moved here, and we did get my parents to move down here. And we lived in Burton Hills, and they lived 5 minutes away, and we were able to have 10 wonderful years with them before they passed. So that's how we wound up in Nashville.
That is a blessing.
Nothing to do with music or anything else except just get my parents to move here.
So what was the scene like here for you? You had this DNA, this history of music. Your brother's in music. You get to Nashville, but you don't do anything with music?
Nothing to have anything to do with music.
So it's just sort of like the difference.
For 15 years we were here. I had a company here, had a business here. I was doing business all over the world, all over the country. I was flying in and out of town. I was making a lot of money. And then I really had no interest in music because I was too old at that point, you know, and I hadn't played in years, and I'd already had that experience, you know, and LA was not going to be a happening thing for me. Nashville, I didn't feel any rapport with the music scene here, and so I didn't even think about it. It had nothing. It wasn't even on my radar screen. It wasn't until 15 years later, when my parents passed away and my wife's parents passed away, that I was going through this malaise of like, what am I going to do? Because I, for the first time, was looking in the mirror and going, I'm not going to last forever either. Your mortality really comes up when you lose your parents. It's the first time you've been an orphan. And so I started thinking about life in a different way at that point. But I didn't have any real focus or enthusiasm. I didn't want to go back into doing what I was doing, which was business consulting. I was kind of done that and been there. Music wasn't really an option anymore, and I was kind of adrift. And it was my wife that suggested, I had this beat up old Yamaha guitar that I just kind of, you know, as part of the furniture, you know, I just brought it along, you stick it in the corner just for a little artifact or something. But it wasn't a good guitar. But she said, why don't you go pick up that guitar and play some songs on it or something? And I went, what's the use? It's ridiculous. And she said, why don't you just do it for your creative fun? And I went and I looked at the guitar, and it had old strings on it, and the strings, of course, were like an inch off the fretboard, and I couldn't even remember how to change the strings. That's how off I had been. It had been 30 years.
Yeah.
So I was just too embarrassed to try to figure out how to do it. So I took it to Schuff's up in Franklin. We had moved down to Franklin at that time frame and moved to West Haven, which we love. We've got a place only a few blocks from here, and we've lived here for over 10 years, which is by far the longest I've ever lived anywhere. So we just, you know, we've had so many opportunities to meet wonderful people here and become part of the community. But
and she had a background in singing and
oh yeah, my wife,
and acting.
we started to sing and work together when we were in LA because she was part of the band. You know, I had a great band. My bass player left our band to join the Bangles. Mickey Steele, fantastic. My drummer was playing on the road with Charlie Sexton, who was opening for Bob Dylan.
I remember Charlie Sexton.
We just had some great players, you know. So
for her to say, let's pick up the guitar again, a little bit of her own desire to maybe get back out there.
She was
partner.
doing some other stuff and wasn't really into music at all either, except for the fact that she started to gain an interest in singing jazz. And she started to do that. She went to the jazz workshop and she learned how to, you know, write out music and charts and stuff. And she started studying with Laurie Meacham and Ron Browning and different people that were out there that, you know, have since gone on to become household names in Nashville. But it was a wonderful experience for her. But once again, I wasn't interested in doing that, and she wasn't interested in doing what I wanted. She was just trying to help me out to try to get my identity back. And my identity was not as a musician, but I started to play a little bit, and, you know, my fingers hurt, and, you know, you have to kind of decide if you're going to pick up something at that age. Or is it something that you want to stay with, or you're going to just play around with, or do you want to actually get good? And I had it in my background, but it's not like falling off a bike. I wasn't any good, and I had to really find an enthusiasm. And I didn't know if I had the juice to even stay with it.
There's that for sure.
But I wound up kind of getting back in the groove with the instrument a little bit, and I started to learn some songs. You know, I covered a couple of songs, and it kind of came back to me, and that's when I decided, you know what, I can't be a rock star in my bedroom, and I don't really have any desire to be a rock star, but can I just go out and perform? You want to play for people. And fortunately, at that time, maybe more than even now, Nashville had a variety of open mic nights where you could just stop in, sign up, and play a song or two or maybe even three songs. And fortunately, there was this little place called Kimbrough's, which was just down the street around the corner, which you on a Tuesday night could go down there and there'd be three songs, sign up. And I went in and I walked in and everybody else was like 18 to 22. And I walk in and I'm like 62. And it's like, who's the old guy with the guitar? You know, if he was any good, he'd be somebody. And so I was kind of embarrassed to be there. But I wound up having a chance to, you know, kind of get my feet wet. And there was times when I bombed, and it was tough because you don't want to be an older guy and walk out ashamed when everybody else is going, whoa, that was terrible. But Jerry Seinfeld said this thing I heard on the radio one time. He said, as a comedian or as any entertainer, you've got to be willing to go out and just bomb. You won't get good unless you're bad. You're going to be bad first. And I had an acting teacher that told me, you've got to learn how to audition before you're going to roll. And don't worry about it because you're not going to get the role. Just learn how to audition. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the first time I tried that, I wound up getting a role in a Broadway show here in Nashville at T-Pack with 2 songs and a featured performer, all because I didn't really care because I knew I wasn't going to get the role, so I didn't have any stress.
Right.
So I wound up being pretty good at doing my thing, and they wound up getting the call back and doing the thing.
The attitude is much more relaxed when you don't think you're going to do
That's
it anyway.
right. It really is. I didn't
and
feel the
you're using
stress.
them for practice, not anxious and desire.
You're just there for the experience.
Yeah. You're an 18-year-old kid, homeless. You really, really need that paycheck.
Yeah.
You're a 65-year-old man. You're like, well, if I get it, I get it. That's awesome. So the industry, let's talk about that for a second. So you come to Nashville, you're not even interested in country that much. It's definitely Music Row. It's country oriented. How did they embrace or Heisman you for a 60-something-year-old guy trying to get into the music business?
Well, one of the things was that they let me know is that it's not happening.
They flat out said close for business.
As an artist, maybe as a writer, but I was not in the interior songwriting circles. This is one of the things that people realize when they come to Nashville is there's already a lot of people here. And those people have been here for a while, and those people know each other already. And those circles are already intact, and they don't want to have a new guy come into their circle. It's a clique. Mm-hmm. And I went down to Music Row one time for the Music Row Awards and watched these guys get Songwriter of the Year or whatever, Song of the Year, Musician of the Year, and I wound up seeing the same 5 or 6 guys cycle through every song in different configurations. I realized there's only a few guys that are writing all the tunes, and I wasn't one of them. So I was on the outside looking in. So I had ambitions as a songwriter, but I didn't really feel that was going to be. I wasn't going to be part of the Nashville scene because I'm a rocker. I'm a singer-songwriter.
It's like wanting to be a chef, but there are no restaurants available.
Yeah. So what are you going to do? You had to create your own. And so I did. And, we formed the band Hemp and Denim. Yep. And I went out, the way we wound up getting our producer who radically changed our lives. This is one of the main keys for me and for my story has been Jim Frazier, because we had an opportunity to go out for a songwriting contest that was sponsored by a publisher that was looking for a country tune, and we didn't have any country songs at all, but we had one song that was kind of more of a Tom Petty kind of a song where we felt maybe that'll work, but once again, no stress. We're not going to get it, so let's just go have the experience and have some fun. So we went down and we played this song, and we just relaxed and we killed it. It was great. And we thought maybe we've got a chance at least to win this contest. But then somebody came in at the end and took over. They had the song. They got the publishing thing. But in the going around the judges, I just went by and said, hey, thanks so much. It's great to be here. It's nice to meet you. And one of those judges was Jim Frazier. And so I went back and I looked him up, and I saw he had a discography, and he was a great musician and had a studio and the whole thing. And so we thought maybe he might want to produce this song for us. And so I called him up, and he said, I'd love to produce that song. And we wound up having the greatest time. He had such a wonderful rapport with our music. He really genuinely liked it. And he had the technical skill in the studio to be a wizard. And my songwriting and his ability, and then with Denim and me, we'd done a lot of recording, and we did a record at A&M Studios, and so we were familiar with the studio. It'd been a long time, but it was like duck off a back's water. And we just found that we had this rapport, and finding the right producer is so key. And we've done 24 tracks with him since then, all full-blown, wonderfully orchestrated, and instruments. And we've had wonderful guys. In fact, you introduced me to Alan Shacklock, who has worked with the George Martin and
Roger
Abbey
Daltrey.
Road Studios, and would master our songs, and so they sounded fantastic and great. But once again, as artists, at this point, I'm 70, my wife's 72, and we look great. We sound better than we look, but there ain't really a market for that, so to speak, unless you consider the fact that there's 60 million baby boomers out there that are tired of classic rock, that are looking for something maybe that sounds like that but isn't that, but can make that DNA that they've got for rock and roll get stimulated again in a way that hasn't been for a long time.
The nostalgia rock.
And we found that without being nostalgia, it was more of a modern take. That's what we brought to the table. And we found that it really resonated with that group of people. So it became more like, how do we get that word out to these people? Because everybody that heard us liked it.
So when God said go to Nashville and you realized, well, of course, to be with my parents in their last days and reunite with my brother, et cetera, once they passed, did you then realize that was the reason? The story you just told us was the reason up to this point? There will be another one we'll talk about now, but did it dawn on you that that's the reason God sent me here? Not necessarily just to save my parents off, but to do this.
Well, I felt once again, Steve, that there was, I don't know if I felt called to get back into music. It just felt like the right thing to do. It was like getting back in the saddle again, and going, hey, I can ride this horse. And it feels good. And we wound up getting good enough that we thought we're actually getting pretty good. And we really have a great vocal sound together. We have a signature vocal sound that's the Hemp and Denim sound. And it's unique. And it's a blend that only God could put together. It's like the Everly Brothers or Crosby, Stills and Nash. It's just like, it's just there when it is. And so we love singing together, and I love performing with her because she's such a star.
Right.
And we started to do that and started to perform around town, and one thing, led to another, and we wound up getting some notoriety and getting some interest.
And the denim is her blue eyes, and the sky part is just the sky.
She
big
comes
sky
from
like
the
Montana.
Isle of Skye.
Isle of Skye.
Her lineage comes from that era, and the Isle of Lewis.
Of Lewis. Hemp Meadows and Denim Sky.
Right.
Your forthcoming book is about a mature man and his spiritual walk, maybe later in life. Did you have an epiphany to come around yourself, and was it difficult to come on you, or did it come on you all of a sudden?
Well, it's both, actually. I've had a series of epiphanies, and, it's like those are fence posts and there's wire in between. And these fence posts that have come into my life, this was one of the main things that happened to me was deciding at the age of 65 to reinvent myself.
Again.
And I've had many incarnations, many lifetimes I've lived where it's like Bob Dylan said one time when they asked him, could you write these songs that made you famous? Could you ever write those songs again? And he went, couldn't do it. And they said, how come? Because he said, because I'm not that guy anymore. And I realized I'm not that guy, and I'm not that guy, and I'm not that guy. Who am I? That becomes a pretty important question as you get older in life, because you realize you've got a limited shelf life. There is an expiration date. And you've got to try to figure out how can I, it's not just necessarily a bucket list of things that you haven't done per se, like travel or play St. Andrews or something like that, but how to actually find more meaning in your life at this time of life when life is shorter and more compressed. And so that became a challenge, and it also became a quest. And that quest ultimately led me back to God. And it led me to begin to get up early in the morning. I got up at 2:30 this morning, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
I used to get mad when I couldn't go back to sleep. I'd get up and I'd be really pissed off. And then I realized, God's calling you. Don't be angry. This is your time with Him.
It's a gift, right?
It's a gift.
Yeah.
You can make it up another time. I've been getting up at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock for a long, long time to sit down and be with Him, and then write and write and write, journal my experience, my thoughts, and put all that together. I've done that for about 3 years now. And that ultimately has turned into this quest where I realized as I became part of, the church and more of a parachurch kind of thing where, you become part of a men's group, like we're part of a men's group together, and there's many of them around town. But as I would start to go to these different men's groups just to become acquainted and meet and see what was going on, each one of them's different personality-wise based on the people that are there, but the themes are all the same. These are all successful guys over the age of 55 that have had great careers in business, are very established, and now are at a time in life where they're not in business anymore. They're not a CEO of a company. They're not leading the charge. They've got the grandkids. They've played golf, and they're maybe kind of just drifting. They're looking for what's next in their life. And I was that guy. Mm-hmm. And I was searching for that as well, too. And what I found was that God had a call on my life that I was finally acknowledging. I finally picked up the phone and went, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's Jesus calling. Mm-hmm. What do you got for me? Mm-hmm. And he went, I have quite a few things for you. Are you ready? And I said, I don't know if I'm ready or not, but I'm listening. And that was the beginning. And I began to write this stuff out. And then you actually approached me and said, why don't you put it into a book? And I had no idea how to do that. I just had stacks and stacks of handwritten pages. That was my own just, vomiting onto the page, or me thinking through these different ideas and studying the Bible and trying to, really dive deep into, these questions, because I had questions that I needed answers for, and God was saying, I'm going to answer it for you. And He did on a daily basis. So putting this book together has been the most challenging and the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
There are more ways to be a front man than just, wear leathers and turn your back on the stage.
Yeah, nobody wants to see a 75-year-old guy in leather.
But they may listen to you as a wise man. What would you say to someone not as successful as you, or didn't have it all and lose it all, but reach the same age and still questions God's role in their purpose? How would they think your life experience could relate to them?
Well, I hope that I'm embodying on some level what I'm talking about. I'm now 72. I'm 73, sorry. And my wife is 75, and we're living our best life. We're having the most fun ever, the most creative time in our lives, and it's because we have a purpose beyond ourselves. God told me that what He wanted me to do was to find my mission in life. And so that became my quest, is what is my mission? Why am I here? I'm still alive. And the Bible says there are good works reserved in my name before the beginning of time. While I was, before I was even a thought and my mom and dad had even come together, what am I here for?
Right. Before drum machines, before MTV, there was something else.
There was something else. Yeah. There's a purpose for every person, every man at this particular time. You're here not 150 years ago and not 150 years from now. You're here right now for a purpose and for a reason. And your purpose is to find out what that reason is and then to live it to the fullest. Yeah. It has nothing to do with career at this point. It has nothing to do with worldly success. You've already had that, and that's an empty thing. Mm-hmm. This is where it gets spiritual, because we're heading towards the clubhouse, and we're on the back nine. Mm-hmm. We're on the 18th hole or the 17th hole or 16th hole, whatever. But we're heading that way, and the lights are on, and there's a sign up that says, welcome. We're coming in for a landing one way or the other, and I want to make the most of that. I want to be peaking right at the right time. I don't want to have a slow decline, and then it's over.
Did you learn any advice from, I know you met kings and queens and presidents and folks at the top of in your career, Rod Stewart we talked about, Don Henley, these are some giants. Any advice that stuck with you? I think Rod is 5 years older than you, and Don Henley maybe 4, so not generations older than you, but they were mentors. Mm-hmm. Did they leave anything with you that has you're also now imparting to the next?
Well, I can't say that either one of them had an impact on me on any level except for the chance to brush up against that level of celebrity and to see it up close and personal. Mm. And both of them were very different personalities. Rod's really this outgoing, self-deprecating, very funny, like the guy you see on stage. I mean, he's just a really super outgoing guy.
Kicking soccer balls out.
Oh,
into the
he's
crowd.
fun and frivolous. And, you know, when I first met him, I thought, this guy's probably going to be a jerk. And he wasn't at all. He understood, yeah, I'm a rock star, but I'm just like you. And he was just fun to be around. He was the kind of guy like you'd like to be friends with. Henley, on the other hand, is a very much darker person. Not negative, but just he's not that ebullient, outgoing guy. He's a much more thoughtful, contained type of personality.
I pulled those two out because you kind of have these qualities yourself, I believe. You have exactly what you described about Rod, and I see what you got in Don. If you had a choice, like if you could go back in time to your teenage self, just arrived in San Francisco or just arrived in LA, whatever you think is more impactful for the next 40 years of your life, what would older Scott say to young Hemp about the road ahead?
Well, the biggest challenge that I've always had in my life has been pride. And I think that's pretty much, the issue with most guys. And pride is a dual-edged sword. It's not only thinking that you're better than somebody, but it's also thinking that you're less than. So a lot of times I was deeply insecure and really self-conscious. And so I didn't go for it, or I wasn't as kind or as nice or as confident as I could have been. I was a jerk at other times when I was, thinking I was really cool and really happening and really hot. And, finally I'm getting the acknowledgement that I so richly deserve, when they say, hey, we're going to put an MTV band around you. We're going to put you on Geffen Records. We're going to make you the lead singer of the band. I've got these other guys from New York and California. We're going to put the band together and everything. And I'm going, oh, yeah, at last, And other times when, you just feel like you're just invisible. I've had that opportunity too. When you're walking down the Sunset Strip and you're broke, you have no money and no car and nothing, and you're looking at clubs you used to play, and now you're on the street, and you feel like a complete and utter failure, which you are. You've lost everything, including your self-respect. So I've had a chance to see both of those sides, and without God at the center, you don't really have an anchor. You can float in between those two things. And it's one of the reasons why you see guys at the top that self-sabotage themselves, because they're dealing with insecurities that are just embedded within their personality, and they can't accept that. And other people that wind up blowing up because they think they're too cool for school, and they're just, nobody likes them anymore. The key thing in Nashville that I've learned, and I think it's true in any studio scenario, is that there's tremendous amounts of talent here. It's, that's the commodity, is the talent.
Yeah.
You only work with who you want to work with, and you don't work with people you don't like.
That makes life easier.
You like the people that are easy to get along with, what we call in Nashville an easy hang.
And a lot of times these guys, once they realize that God is the front man, they can actually start doing it for joy and pleasure and worship, and a lot less about
That's right.
money and paychecks and entourage and bling and the front row of the, whatever.
In fact, those things get in the way of your relationship with God.
They're temptations, right? That's
Yeah.
the devil. Why men? Why is your mission focused on the men amongst us?
Well, because I think they're underserved. I think the men are the key to life, the key to society. The men have built this world. And we are the kings. We are nothing without our queens, like James Brown said. It ain't nothing without a woman. But it's up to us, and we need to step up and step out and, take a stand and know who we are. And I think we've been beaten down a lot.
Yeah.
And there is a masculine aspect to who we are that's kind of missing in a lot of guys right now, particularly guys that are kind of drifting, that have talent and ability and no real focus. And so I felt like, women have so many things that they can do, and as far as being with each other. And at my age, every woman is already married. It's not up to me to try to tell a guy how to be with his wife, or try to tell a guy how to be successful in business. I don't want to do either one of those things. I want to help shape men to become the best man that God created them to be.
Mm-hmm.
If we all were that, our wives would be, the women would be totally happy, I think.
Yeah. At the spiritual and the soul level, not so much on the trophy wife level type of thing. Like if they've got that person, that's their choice, but we're going to talk about
And I think most of us
eternity.
guys that have been married for a long time feel like we have trophy wives. They deserve a trophy for being with us as long as
for
we have been
endurance
with.
more
That's
than
right.
for beauty. So I think I've made the case pretty well in our time together, ups and downs, overs and outs, learn one thing type of thing from Sinatra. But Nashville Entertainer of the Year. There's a lot of those, as you said. There's a lot of people in Nashville entertaining. You must have felt like a particularly timely acknowledgement of your hard work and your life to get that. Is that about?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a tremendous acknowledgement. It's for independent artists. We're not signed to a label. We had no desire to do that. I'm a businessman. I own my own catalog. We have a production company. We do our own thing. We own everything that we do and produce. And so we're independent and proudly so. But to get acknowledged by other people, obviously, whether it's applause at a performance or whether it's a professional recognition like what those awards are. We've gotten 3 Nashville Music Awards, and it's tremendous.
Mm-hmm. In the town that you said day one, they said,
Yeah.
we're not here for you.
No, and
You proved them wrong.
It's been it's never, the hardest part is the business part. The joy of it is the writing and the development and the recording. To me, is more fun than the performing. But performing is part of it. It's no good if you can't go out and take it out and share it and perform it. And there's nothing like the live experience. And so, particularly with my wife, she is the star of our show. And so we just have this kind of in fact, if we were just talking about Henley and Rod Stewart, she's more of the Rod Stewart and I'm more of the Don Henley type. So when we go out, we have this great yin and yang thing going on. And we've also been married for 40 years. So we have this couple thing going on. We have a rapport that a lot of people don't have. And we enjoy each other immensely. And so, and we sound great together. The hard thing is to wind up being on stage at the same time, both happy and ready to play,
Yeah.
Our last show, which was just here in West Haven over Memorial Day, we had a big argument right before we were going to go on stage. And it's like I just realized, look, I've got to be the guy that's going to change or it's going to ruin everything.
Right.
I can't make it
the
better.
brothers of the Black Crowes would fist fight or Oasis, right?
Yeah.
So husband and wife, even more difficult, Sonny and Cher type of situation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last question. Thank you so much, first of all, for sharing with us. I mean, I really love this show. Singer, songwriter, husband, you just described, mentor, child of God, now author. I think you've done it all. That's a strong finish, to quote your book title, by anyone's measure. That's a strong finish, but you're not done. So, but you are a good and faithful servant. Any worlds left to conquer? What's next for you?
Well, I want to see this book through. I want it to get out. I would definitely like for it to have an impact. And I would like to be able to support that message through speaking to men. And I've begun doing that. And I've never found anything more rewarding. I get to sing a song or two along the way, which is fun as well, too. But God showed me that, you can impact people through your music, but it's your life that's the biggest impact. Mm-hmm. And to have the opportunity to get in front of these other guys that are all they're all survivors. They're all worldly men in the sense that they've been there and done that. Some of these guys own planes. Some of them are billionaires. Some of them are multimillionaires. Some of them have, they've just had tremendous success in business and different ideas and things that are going on. So the opportunity to address them is both humbling, but I want to motivate and inspire them to step up in their spiritual life and really lay that out before Christ and say, what do you want me to know and what do you want me to do? Because none of us are living up to our potential. And that's really what I want to do, is I want to find out what is my potential and how can I step into that and really become the man that God created me to be.
And there very much is a King David story here where, the music and as well as the leadership and the mistakes and the highs and lows and the humanity of it, because you and I are not Jesus, but we're trying our best as a human to do King David type things. So good for you. Congratulations. Thank you so much for coming on here. And hang on, everybody. I will be right back.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.
Thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That's how we grow and keep this content free for you. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Scott Arvin, Hemp, for reminding us God created every man intentionally and uniquely for a purpose. Sometimes we take the long and winding scenic route to that purpose, but we get there eventually. The final decades of life are not meant for passive decline, but for spiritual awakening, renewal, mission, leadership, contribution, and transformation. Thanks to Hemp for reminding us. Can't wait to read your book and have you back for the launch. Look for it everywhere books are sold and online soon. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com. See you all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely glory to God.
The waiting time is over. The victory is here. Let's give God all the glory, 'cause we're standing in the clear. We needed a revelation
It's a long way to Nashville from that Napa Valley vine. Put me on a road less traveled. Lord, now I know why. God knew I'd get there in His perfect time.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.
Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee. Now I write songs about the heartland. My heartland's in Tennessee.